Hello and welcome to the Ideas Factory. I'm Nakma and joining me is Professor Harsh Pant.
There is a history of Trump 1.0, but again, that's no guide for Trump 2.0. And India will have to navigate every day as it comes. The polarization or the fragmentation of American polity or American democracy, the challenges that it is facing are going to disappear. There are going to be some adjustments that India will have to make.
Talking about the third gender itself in the inaugural speech, that also has been very against the woke culture.
We do see a trend where partnerships with like-minded countries in the Indo-Pacific is going to be the norm and is going to be taken further ahead. The Chinese leadership that is forward-looking, that is engaged with Trump. This sense of unpredictability is what the Chinese don't like.
Because the H-1B visa holders were very, very skeptical about it. Now the birthright citizenship also is going to affect a lot of Indians there. But what really are Indians looking forward to? Hello and welcome to the Ideas Factory. I'm Nakma and joining me is Professor Harsh Pant. America has a new president. Donald Trump is back as the 47th president in the United States of America, surviving physical attacks on him during the campaign, as well as many charges and cases that he faced. He's back and he's more bold than ever. He's more aggressive. The first speech that he made, Harsh, he spoke of everything that he's been talking during the campaign. And we don't really know whether it'll be possible to achieve all of that. But let's start with the birthright citizenship that he has decided to do away with. And there is a backlash. 22 states have gone to court against this order. Trump has been talking about a lot of things, but how difficult will it be to implement, even though this time he's made huge changes in the bureaucracy, the judiciary? But how do you see the new Trump that we saw the other day during the inauguration ceremony?
I think he was trying to be both himself and not very himself, or not very Trump 1.0. I think it has been, in some ways, a remarkable journey for a man who almost a year back, everyone was counting out, and it would be a difficult journey for him to come back, and there were all kinds of analyses being made. But I do think that it has been a journey for America itself, in terms of its own evolution as a democracy and how you confront some of those challenges. 4 years back, we had seen the same person as an outgoing president not really respecting the norms of the change of power. This time, I think we saw America and Americans seemingly coming together at the inauguration, where you had all the ex-presidents were there, and of course there was a seamlessness to the whole process. So I think it looked as if there was a healing process going on in the U.S., in the democratic setup of the U.S. But I think fundamentally the country remains very, very polarized, very divided. And Trump did reach out to the other side in some of the statements that he made. But largely, I think what he was trying to show, and what he has shown so far in his first few days, is that he remains true to his cause. He remains true to the themes of his campaign. And I think in that sense, whether it was pardoning the January 6th rioters, or whether it was talking about immigration and making immigration the central pillar of his policy agenda. I think these are all issues in which through which he's trying to reach out to his base and telling them that I get you, I get your concerns. And given that he has been categorically elected this time, unlike the past time, there is a sense that from the very beginning he wants to show himself as presidential, that he knows what he's doing. Last time, you would recall, he got a lot of flack that he came to the office unprepared. He had no policy agenda on the table. At this time, of course, he has so many things on the table that he's trying to accomplish in the first few days. That is mind-boggling almost, from geopolitics, from foreign policy, national security, immigration, to domestic economic landscape. So I do think that it's going to be a huge challenge, a long haul for him, because a lot of things, as you mentioned, how operational they would be, yes, how implementable they would be. But he has fired the first salvo, as we say.
But he has fired the first salvo, and it's going to change a lot in the world, his relationship with other countries, Europe, China, India, all of that. But what's in store for America, really? Like you mentioned, America is more polarized or as polarized as it was the last time, even though Trump looks a little more mature, a little more prepared, probably. I don't know if everyone agrees to that. And he has an agenda. And the agenda seems to be really, really large. But, like something like talking about the third gender itself in the inaugural speech, that also has been very against the woke culture. He mentioned that America's expansionist policy was also very, very visible when he talks about renaming the Gulf of Mexico and calling it Gulf of America. So will America be very polarized during the coming years, during Trump's new tenure, or do you think he's more acceptable now because he's also got a huge popular vote? He's won in all the swing states. Is he more acceptable than he was last time?
Well, I don't think so. I think if you read the reports of that, half of Washington vacated itself during the inauguration ceremony because Washington, of course, is such a blue state.
They all went to holiday somewhere else.
So I do think that I don't think that polarization will stop, or that Trump has it in him to reach out to the other side. I think again, the way he has handled the
probably he doesn't want to reach out to the other
because
side.
He thinks that his agenda perhaps is more acceptable now, given that he got a bigger mandate this time compared to what he got last time. So I don't think that the polarization or the fragmentation of American polity or American democracy, the challenges that it is facing, are going to disappear. But Trump, in some ways, is also very good and very capable in shattering the seeming consensus on a lot of issues. You would recall last time, we used to say, China policy, there is a core consensus on China policy before Trump came. Suddenly he came, he reversed that overnight. And everyone fell in line, from domestic politics, from the Democrats to the Europeans. And I think the change in discourse on China started with Trump 1.0. So I think he's quite capable through these dramatic actions and the way he creates and generates certain debates on certain issues to change the focus of the discourse. And I think that is going to be very, very interesting to watch out, because he has laid out, as we were discussing, an expansive agenda. And almost all of these issues are about challenging the fundamental assumption of what America used to stand for. From geopolitics, from the neighborhood policy, to economy and tariffs, to immigration, to birthright, who's a citizen and who is not. In that sense, he's challenging the foundations of American Constitution itself. And therefore, the whole issue of citizenship is going to be such a long, drawn-out process, because it requires constitutional amendment. It requires two-thirds mandate from the U.S. Congress. And whether he would be able to get that is not clear at all. So I do think that. But what he has done in some ways is to put the debate squarely in the public space. That a lot of the people used to talk about it. Immigration has been a big issue. Both sides have been grappling with it. And he has said, well, we can't take on the challenge of immigration without looking at who's an American citizen and who is not. And I'm going to relook at the fundamentals. Now, I think the other institutions of the American state now have to push back and come to some consensus. But he has made his first move, and I think it's going to be very interesting to see that against a popular sort of a backlash. How do we navigate that? How does America navigate that?
So it's going to be a long-drawn process, like you say. But what about the illegal immigrants? He's come very heavily on them too. And there are issues, a lot of, as far as the visas are concerned, a lot of Indians are very worried, and also about the birthright citizenship. Of course, India is very important for the US now. We know that our External Affairs Minister was there, and he's been talking to the new administration too. But do you see any change in the way our relationship was going forward with America?
I think there are going to be some adjustments that India will have to make, like most of the countries, and I think it is not. It has been true of previous administrations as well. Sometimes we forget that when what happened when the previous administration was taking over. I mean, you would recall, right? When Mr. Biden was taking over, there was so much debate on whether Biden would be too intrusive, whether human rights, domestic politics in India are going to be his core concern, etc.
Absolutely.
And there was a lot of concern in this country as to where and how Mr. Biden will position himself, between the moderates and the progressive within the Democratic Party. So I do think that even now with Mr. Trump, there is a history of Trump 1.0, but again, that's no guide for Trump 2.0, and India will have to navigate every day as it comes.
But is Trump 1.0, how different it will be? To Trump 2.0, how different is it from Trump 1.0? Also, if we look at in the Indian context, Indians are very ecstatic about Trump's win, and there has been a huge celebration. And we fail to understand why, but also because the H-1B visa holders were very, very skeptical about it. Now the birthright citizenship also is going to affect a lot of Indians there. But what really are Indians looking forward to?
Well, I don't know why we are ecstatic. I think, or some sections in the media in particular seem extremely ecstatic.
Yes.
But by and large, India-US relationship has been doing pretty well across administrations. And I think it's a tribute to both the way we have handled our diplomatic agenda and the way America has been looking at India as a primary balancer in the region. And I think if you combine the two, you look at a trajectory of a relationship that has been remarkably consistent and remarkably forward-looking. We have been solving one issue after another in the relationship. With Mr. Trump, we are getting a lot of newer issues which are problematic. On citizenship, on H-1B. All of these issues are going to impact lots of ordinary Indians who perhaps used to look at or still look at US as their primary destination for work, for education, etc. And I think that recalibration will need to happen in terms of our expectations or the expectations of our citizens vis-a-vis the US and American system's ability to deliver on those expectations. I think that recalibration has to happen at some point. Mr. Trump is forcing that recalibration at this point. But I know there are so many other issues where I think we will also see some challenge. We will see some challenge on economy and trade. We know that some tariffs are coming our way. He has mentioned it in the past. He has mentioned India as a tariff king in the past, not in the very recent past, but he has that sense that you have to that America is being has not been treated fairly by its trading partners, and India is one of them, according to him. Now, I think India will have to ensure that that India continues to deliver on some counts, so that our space on those issues where we can't deliver gets maximized, so that we have that space to maneuver. And I do think that, for example, in one of the things that India has said, that of course we would take back illegal immigrants, right? So India is ensuring that it is making a case that we understand America's priorities, we understand the change in American domestic political sentiment, and we are willing to help in whatever way we can, because going against that sentiment is not an option, and we have to figure out that recalibration in our response to various issues that will come on the table. Now, and I think Trump can in some ways creates a lot of opportunities for us. We know that Trump 1.0 did create a lot of opportunities for India in terms of the positioning that India had in the Indo-Pacific vis-a-vis China as an alternative to China in the supply chain framework. And as global value chains shift away from China, which started under Trump 1.0 and which is likely to continue under Trump 2.0, India certainly can emerge as a major node in that framework. And I think that's something that India will have to both build its own domestic capacity as well as work with partners like the US to ensure that happens.
But he's withdrawn from WHO, and we know, this is again not unexpected. He did that in his first term. He's not a fan of multilateral organizations. At the same time, we have the Quad meetings and the ministers are there. When you talk of Indo-Pacific, how do you think this would pan out? What changes can we expect here?
I think multilateralism has been in a very bad shape for a very long time. And though Mr. Biden and the Democrats in general tend to be in favor of multilateralism, but we did not see the kind of commitment, even under Biden, and that Americans used to have in the past to multilateral organizations or to multilateral frameworks. And I think we are moving towards a world order where minilaterals, plurilaterals, ad hoc coalitions are going to be the defining frameworks for countries. And Quad, in that sense, certainly gives the US and India a framework to operate, which I think is very productive, which has been very productive so far. And given that this was the first meeting of any first official meeting of the foreign ministers under Trump administration, I think it does signal America's resolve in continuing with such plurilaterals. And it is also interesting if you see it in the context of what perhaps he has been, Trump and others have been saying about China. I mean, Trump is giving mixed signals. He has on the one hand been taken very tough line against China, but on the other he has also said that, look, I have had a very good conversation with Xi and I want to solve global problems with him. He has always had this appreciation or for Xi Jinping. In the past also we have heard him often, but the structural realities of the relationship are such that there are limits to such personal fascination and personal engagement. I think we saw that even in the Indian context. I think we are going to see that in the US context as well. But whatever we have heard from, for example, Marco Rubio during his hearings, appointment hearings, I think we do see a trend where partnerships with like-minded countries in the Indo-Pacific is going to be the norm and is going to be taken further ahead. And India will certainly be a major partner in that regard. So I think that space for India is there. How India plays the long game with Trump administration, that's too early to tell at this point. But I think partnering in that framework, partnering in Quad is something that benefits India as well. And India has been a big votary of Quad for obvious reasons, because even for India, a lot of the multilateral institutions are problematic. While we believe in multilateralism and India continues to invest in multilateral institutions, I think the framework is still a bit very 20th century power balance structures where India does not have a major role. So I do think that it does not really, go against Indian foreign policy interest if Mr. Trump and his administration is able to shake up some of these multilateral institutions from the stupor, from the kind of stasis that they seem to have been stuck for a while.
Sure. When we look at now, let's look at US-China. I remember during the Trump's first term, there was a big change that happened in the US relationship with America, and there was kind of a continuity during the Biden administration too, even though the words spoken could have been different, the style could have been different, but not a big change. Now, do you think that continuity will be there, or what's on the anvil for the US-China relationship right now, especially with hawks like Marco Rubio being there and somebody who's facing, there have been sanctions on him and he's not allowed in China. So how do you see the US-China relationship, and what should China be worried about, or US's concerns?
I think China certainly would be looking at this administration with wariness. And as they have, if you are in China and if you are a Chinese policymaker, you're looking at the rhetoric of the campaign. If you're looking at almost a bipartisan consensus on how China should be treated. And of course, the appointments that Mr. Trump has made, like including Marco Rubio. But the Chinese are very good at using whatever opportunities they have. They have never wasted an opportunity whenever they have got it. And if you look at the kind of sentiments, the kind of exchanges that Trump has had with the leadership in China, you are seeing a Chinese leadership that is forward-looking, that is engaged with Trump, even though they know that there are limits to what Trump would do. In fact, Trump has given them an opening. If you think of TikTok, for example, by giving TikTok a reprieve of a few days, he's also using that as a lever. He's also ensuring that how will the Chinese react, whether they'll come to the table with a better bargain. And I do think that in so many ways Trump is using perhaps all the levers that he has. He's the carrot is there, the stick is there. He's waxing eloquent about his ability to work with Xi. At the same time, he's appointing Marco Rubio. So this sense of unpredictability is what the Chinese don't like, and I think Trump is playing on that in a way to get a better bargain out of the Chinese. Now, what the Chinese are able to deliver, and whether it works for Xi Jinping for his domestic audience, because that's what the most important audience for him is. I think that remains to be seen. But I think you do see a number of factors converging and making US-China relationship a bit more problematic than perhaps we have seen in the past. And we know that it has been extremely difficult time for US-China relationship in the last decade, in fact.
So, okay, now one more thing. He announced during his inauguration that the golden period of America now begins. Now, this golden period, what does it mean for the world? If I may focus on, West Asia, Russia, Europe. He's also been saying that America is for peace now. And he wants to establish peace. And he's shown that he wants, look at West Asia. Just before his inauguration, 5 days before that, the deal finally happened. I don't know if it is short-lived or not, but at least the deal is now in place. Even though Trump himself has said that he is not very confident. And the real estate magnate that he is, a tycoon, he's saying that it needs to be rebuilt. It has a beautiful coastline. And it's a wonderful area. So what's in store for West Asia, and how do you think this America's policy towards West Asia would change now?
So I think one thing that comes out very clearly, Nagma, is that he's not interested in foreign adventures or foreign engagements of where America is engaged militarily abroad.
He said it very clearly. It's not our war, yeah.
And not only West Asia, not only Russia, Ukraine, but he made this point about American foreign aid, where he has said that, look, foreign aid creates problems elsewhere. We intervene in other places. We try to impose our way, and we don't want to do it. America is not going to do it, and we are going to retreat. And I think this, in some ways, has been the broad idea, if you will, of Mr. Trump from the very beginning, even from Trump 1.0, that in America should first focus on domestic issues, on building capacity at home, rather than spending its resources abroad. And of course, there are times when America has to do certain things. Now, I'm sure even Mr. Biden, who withdrew from Afghanistan, would not have wanted to enter into a war with Russia, but given the circumstances, you have to do what you have to do as a policymaker. But I think where Trump is categorical is that he does not want American interventions or America to be part of these wars and to be part of these undertakings, which creates a dilemma for some of America's partners. Because many of these American partners at this point, particularly in Europe, feel the threat from Russia, for example, and they don't know whether America will stand by them. And of course, we know the relationship that he has with NATO and how he has been critical of NATO. So, it's America today under Trump has sent certain messages. If it means that countries, America's partners, should be willing to foot more bill, should be willing to do more for their own defense. He's even said this about Taiwan, that Taiwan should be doing more for its own defense, which means that countries will have to take greater responsibility for their own national security, and America will not be the ultimate guarantor of security as it had been for a long time, which creates challenges for the global order, which may be in sync with American domestic sentiment, but it creates those challenges because it means that you will see greater military expenditures everywhere, you would see greater instability, you will see security dilemmas emerging across the world. And how do you navigate that as a global power? I think that's going to be the challenge for Mr. Trump. While you can always say that we will not do wars or we will not enter into military conflicts, but often this is not a choice that you get, especially for a global power like the US. It is something that that you have to do under the circumstances. So how will you take yourself out? How does America take itself out from these wars and conflicts, including West Asia, which so many presidents in the past have tried to wean themselves away from the Middle East, but Middle East comes back with a bang. So I think all of these challenges will be there for Mr. Trump, and I think.
And what about Russia? I mean, what changes there? Because now we have Mr. Trump and not Biden. So America's position is changing now as far as the Russia-Ukraine war is concerned.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that you could have assumed, or one can assume, is that the Ukraine war will come to an end in one way or the other with Mr. Trump there. But he has made a very interesting observation as well. I think just after inauguration, in one of his statements, he has said, "Oh, Putin is not doing very well. Russia is not doing very well at all. It is in his interest to now come to the negotiating table and end this war." So I think, I think as a president of United States, you would not try to end a war where you or your partner is seen as losing. And I think that's going to be a challenge, right? For whatever, when he was not the president, it was easier to say that, Ukraine can give up this and Ukraine can do this. Now that you are president, on your watch, do you want to conclude a war where your partner or the country on whose behalf you have invested so much resource is seen as the losing side? And I think that's the question he will have to answer, because leadership also means that he'll be judged on that account, both domestically and abroad.
Sure. To sum up the conversation, the world should expect more unpredictability everywhere.
Yes, I think that's seemingly that's something that he thrives on, and he believes that in negotiations, unpredictability yields great dividends. So even if for no other reason, I think this is a good enough reason for us to think that unpredictability will be everywhere for the next 4 years.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Harsh, for that analysis. Interesting times ahead for America and for the world, and a lot will change in the way America is engaging with the world. Thank you so much for watching.